Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. Welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Podcast. This is Jonathan Goldhill, your host, and today I have a very special guest that is an entrepreneur, but comes to the business of family business from a very interesting background. Let me share with you her background. Her name is Amber Flamminio, and she is the Chief Operating Officer of Umina Brothers, which is a wholesale produce distributor and seller down in Los Angeles. That's a 106-year-old company, family owned and operated, and originally from New York City, where my family's business harkens. So she is a strong operations professional with a master's degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. So go figure, someone who had a private practice in psychology as well had an acting background. She was working part-time as an actress when she was also working part-time for the family business over her years in college. I'm going to let her tell her story. But Amber, welcome to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
So we talked yesterday. We just got to know each other a little bit. Tell everyone, how did you come to join this family business?
I guess it's one of those things, right? You're either attracted to it or repulsed by it. I was born into it. And I guess I was both attracted and repulsed at different points in my life. So when I was a kid, I used to go down to the market with my dad in the middle of the night. It was all really exciting and pretty intriguing. It was like this whole city that came alive in the middle of the night when everything else was sleeping. So that was always this fun, imaginative environment for me as a kid. And then as I got into adulthood, it was just this thing that supported our family. I didn't really think too much of it. And then in college, it became a way for me to have a part-time job while acting and doing some other things. And so it was just kind of a means to an end, never really thought too much of it. Again, it was something I don't want to say I took for granted, but it was always there. As I got on with my professional career, I started to see the implications and the opportunity of being in a family-owned business, family-run business. So while there were things that were super challenging about it and things that had kind of made me never really consider it at an earlier age, there were things as I got older that I really started to appreciate and saw a great opportunity. So that's eventually how I landed there.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting story because oftentimes the family business is a great platform for getting into business. And oftentimes people come in because they feel like they should, they must. The family needs them, in a time of crisis, in a time of maybe where you have to hunker down because maybe the economy is not doing so well. You got to help out the family and you need to quit doing what you're doing. So is that something that played out for you, or how did that play out? I mean, because here you had, again, you had an acting career, you had a psychology practice, you were running a substance abuse facility after getting your degree, your master's program. I mean, you were heading down a very different path. And here
I was.
And now you get into this male-dominated produce industry where you literally have shattered the glass ceiling. So, tell us, what was it? A should? Was it a must? Was it a want? And how did those all blend together?
I think to tease that out, there in the beginning, it definitely felt like a should and a must. At the time, my dad had come to me and said, "Hey, I could really use you." And I'd never really heard that from him before. Maybe I was looking for something different as well. I think at that point in my life, I was appreciating the idea of stability, and I was appreciating the idea of an established business. I think I'd been grinding so hard for the prior 10 years of my life that, oh wow, to walk into, like, to be a part of this established company in a weird backwards way, felt really soothing and seemed like a good opportunity. So, and then there was the other part of the family aspect. It was my dad asking me, right? It was my dad coming to me. And so there was kind of this responsibility that I felt like, okay, they had done so much for me my whole life. I got to go do everything I wanted to do. And so here's my opportunity to give back. Here's my opportunity to do for my family what they've done for me, continue to support them, support my own family, and support all the families that had helped us all along the way. So it was definitely a combination of a should and maybe a must. I guess the must was more of I definitely internalized that. My dad never put the pressure that I had to, but I definitely felt a nudge that he would appreciate it, or that there was potentially this opportunity really for a door opening potentially for me there.
So, oh, look, we have a little visitor here. So he's going to go down. Someone wanted to keep me company during my podcast. So, all right. So, interesting story. Now, at some point, you were probably dealing with some resistance among non-family members who were in the business that were now having to maybe report to or be accountable to a family member, a female in a male-dominated business. And what was that like? What would you, and if you were telling an entrepreneur, a woman entrepreneur who was getting into a male-dominated business, like, what advice might you give your younger self or give that woman?
I think in the beginning it was like, oh, how cute. Amber's working at the company. Oh, that's so sweet. I'd known a lot of these guys since I was a kid in some form or fashion. And like like it was said before, I worked there since college. So by the time I joined, that was, around 13 years later when I came on full time. So I had a relationship, but I had never really been a permanent fixture. So now all of a sudden coming in as this permanent fixture was like, they didn't really quite know what to do with me. They didn't dislike me. But I don't think they really thought too much of me. I think they liked me plenty as a person, but I don't think that they were really looking at me to be in charge or take control, or maybe like I had anything really to offer.
Did they think of you in your earlier role in the company when you were originally doing, bookkeeping and, office type stuff? Did they see like, this is, she's going to be our new boss?
I don't think so. I mean, I remember, and again, I don't think any of this stuff was conscious, but our CFO, I remember I was working on these bank recs at one point, and our CFO like looked at me. I brought some things into him and couldn't get down to like the last like 2 cents or whatever, right? Like couldn't find those 2 pennies, and it was kind of thrown out there like, oh, well, what do you know? You mean you were just an actress anyway? Those things were kind of tossed out there and around, and those things, I just kind of gathered information. I spent the first couple of years just gathering information and really trying to figure out what my spot was going to be. My dad was happy to give out any sort of title that I wanted, but I really wanted to have a purpose. I mean, to be there to collect a paycheck, I wasn't really interested in that. I wasn't really interested to come and babysit a desk. And being in family business, and I'm sure anyone who's listening to this can relate, when you step into a position of, or really any position, so nobody wants to be your boss, right? Or no one wants to tell you or give you instruction or tell you what to do or tell you that you're doing something wrong or correct you or anything or give you any sort of feedback at all. So it was kind of hard in the beginning to get people to give me things to do. Oh, no, I'll do it, right? Because they were scared that, oh no, were they not doing their job? If I was going to be taking it, was I going to take their job? There's
Yeah.
all these weird things that play out in the beginning. So for me to grab hold of anything from anybody in the beginning was kind of a difficult challenge. And then when I tried to impart some of my different things from psychology to help, change some behaviors and different things like that, there was just that culture of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what I brought to the table was kind of like, oh, again, cute, that's nice, but there wasn't really a need or a push.
So very often in my experience in family businesses, family members are put into roles that are ill-defined.
Yes.
And so you're just, okay, you'll do this, you'll do that, you'll do the other thing.
Yes.
And so that can be confusing to people, especially, the person like yourself who's in that role, like what is my role in this company? And so what have you done to overcome that? Like, have you had to define roles more clearly in the business as you've taken over in an operational role?
Yes, absolutely. I joined a business group called Vistage, and they helped me to carve out or to better understand um, my function, I guess, really what I was doing when I would come in and be like, well, I do this, and that, and I kind of do this and I kind of do that, and I do a little, so they were like, well, this sounds like you do X, Y, and Z. This sounds like you are fulfilling this role. And so all of a sudden when I got some structure and some definition around it, I felt a lot better. I felt like I had a direction. Yes, I felt like I was floating for a long time. And again, like trying to get feedback or trying to find a mirror to help me figure out what direction I wanted to go in or how I was going to take shape in that space. It really took an outside group to help me do that.
That makes sense. So I find that as a coach and as coaches in general, working with teams, we spend a large portion of time, maybe even the first year, making sure that the right people are in the right seats on the bus, so to speak, or in the company. And so in a family business where family members are more forgiving of other family members, and it may be a little bit more difficult to define and figure out, like, what are my really unique abilities? What can I bring to this business? So tell us a little bit about what your exploration was like and figuring out, are you in that right seat, and are you in that right seat right now, or is it still evolving?
I think I do feel one of my favorite things in life is to find the shortest distance between 2 points, to find the most efficient way to do something, the most direct way to go about something to get things done. So when I look at, and it's so funny, I have Harvard Business Review, I have their page of what a COO is bookmarked on my desktop to review that from time to time, because it is this ever evolving thing. And as they put it, it depends on where you're at, right? It depends on the needs of the company, and wherever you're at, the COO will fulfill that role. So that gives me flexibility. It gives me the freedom, and it kind of gives me this outlying structure to kind of take on and do. And yet at the end of the day, my objective is always to find the efficiencies, always to find kind of the operational excellence in any aspect of the business that I'm kind of looking at. So if it's an HR thing, if it's protocol, if it's warehouse, okay, how do we make this as efficient as possible? How do we tackle this head on? I think a lot of what I did in the beginning was just calling things out. I think a lot of things went unspoken. There were so many things that people were doing that they didn't really know why they were doing it. It's just been what they've been doing for so long. So a lot of my beginning stage stuff was just asking a lot of questions, being really humble and trying to learn. And then in that, trying to shape things once I.
So let me ask you, so for anyone who's listening and wondering what that Harvard Business Review article was, so I'm familiar with an article from years ago that I used to use called The Misunderstood Role of the Second in Command.
That's the one.
That's the article. So it's a classic article on the chief operating officer and the multiple different roles that one might play. Do you recall some of those roles? Can you share what some of them are?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
So one is being like, being the listener, which is what I've oftentimes referred to myself as the CEO whisperer. So someone who is the confidant, the VP, the person that you could talk to and, spill as a CEO, they could spill their guts, their heart, their soul to you, and you could just sort of shoulder it all. But the other one is, they have tons of ideas about what we can do. And our role as a COO is to say, yes, yes, no, 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 no. We can do two of those. These are the ones I think are the best, and I'll execute on those. But that's the article. So good to know that you use that and that it's still a valuable piece.
Yes, I think so.
Right. So your father is still in the role of the CEO or president of the company?
Correct. Yes.
And is he the idea guy? Is he the one? What role is he playing?
He was. I would say up a few years ago, things probably started to shift a little bit, and we started collaborating a lot. And then in the last year, COVID really pushed a lot of things into new positions.
Mm-hmm.
With the virus in the beginning, not knowing, he is I believe he's 74 now. So
okay.
the older age group, not knowing how the virus was going to affect them in the beginning, we just kind of made a doctrine just to keep him out of the office. And
Gotcha.
he had a really hard time not coming in. He's been coming in for 40 some odd years. It's his family there. It's just in his blood. So to have him not in the office was really difficult. But it allowed me to step into that role of really leading and making calls and making decisions. And so I'd say in the last year, the ideas and all that have kind of shifted. I would run a lot of stuff by him, and a lot of stuff be like, oh no, we don't do that. No, we can't do that. No, it's like, we're not built for that. And now all of a sudden it's like, and because COVID, right, here we are.
Yep.
We deal with a lot of purveyors, food service, restaurants, all that stuff has kind of dried up. And so here we are looking at, okay, what are other options? And so the ability to explore is more available.
Gotcha. So let me just understand what you said. So COVID basically caused him as an older person to come into the office less,
yes,
out of safety and for, self-preservation. And so that passing of the baton from one generation to the next happened because of some outside event.
Yes.
And yet it needed to happen over time anyway. Yeah. So it was good. Was it difficult? It was difficult for him not coming in. Was it difficult for you to take over in that role and start making decisions?
Yeah, I think all of a sudden it was like, okay, how do I want to lead the business? If this were my business, how do I want to show up? Instead of showing up to check in with him, I'm showing up for myself to go take care of my people and this business. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of, there's just been so much uncertainty throughout this year, but there was just a lot of discovery as well of like, okay, how do I want to go about and tackle this? How would I come at this challenge? So, and my dad has been so wonderful actually through this whole process. I guess the challenge is he's not much of a teacher, but he also gives a lot of permission for me to go try. He might bat ideas and say no, or give me, come up and give me a wall to throw things at, he still has given me space to show up, to really and try things out.
So I think it's very interesting. I was on a podcast this morning with one of my other clients who is a disruptor and a successor. And I think that the secret to being a disruptive successor might be in the predecessor giving permission to lead, creating the space.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I said about this young man, I said, your father is the unsung hero here. He's the person who had the courage to know that he could let go, the confidence that he could trust in his next generation leader, and like the capacity to know the difference between when risk taking was too much or not enough. So that's great. So it sounds like, and maybe do you know much about his experience in the transition from his predecessor to him?
Yeah, he so the business was owned by his uncles. So he actually had no interest in going into business at all. His grandmother, when she was dying on her deathbed, told him that he needed to buy the business from the uncles. She said, this is the one thing I ask you to do. Please, I want you to do this. When he was a kid, to keep him out of trouble, they used to send him down there to work. And so since he was 14, he'd been lugging around wine grapes and citrus and doing all this stuff in the family's effort to keep him out of trouble. So he'd been involved. He went to the Air Force. He was going to be a teacher, had totally separate plans. And by the grace of his grandmother begging him to do this, he agreed and went and purchased the company from his uncles. It was 2 bays. It was a very small operation. He bought it. I think he paid 10 grand and then paid them off
Right.
For all the years. And he did every job. He bought his first truck, made his own deliveries, picked up his own product. I mean, he literally grew this into what it is today. So that's another interesting thing, is figuring out when you're stepping into something that is so established and stepping into something that is so defined, can be really daunting. So daunting to try to figure out what your mark is, and is that going to be enough, and what does that look like if I don't do it the same way he does? And that was a really big transition for me, and what allowed me to step into this period of COVID and all this stuff and feeling confident to lead.
So let me ask you a question. So I always find that successful businesses that scale up and that are sellable businesses, because they're built to sell, if you will, and that means that they are system dependent businesses, not people dependent. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is that there's clarity around what each person, what that role or function is supposed to do, and what are the SOPs, standard operating procedures around doing those things. So when you joined the business, was it a system dependent, people dependent still?
People. We're in the process we're in the very beginning stages of making this a system based business, taking it from a family, keeping the family element, taking it from a family held company to a professionally held company. That's really what we're in this. That's one of my one of the big shifts that we've been working on over the last 3 years.
And where does the resistance to that shift show up, or how does it show up? Maybe you could give us an example, even if it's petty, like, this is that resistance, holding on.
Yeah. My dad loves his people, and he loves his people so much that sometimes he keeps people on, even though they probably shouldn't be there. And a very clear example that always comes to mind, we had this woman that worked in our office. God bless her. She was a lovely person. She'd been there for 20 years. And Jonathan, no one could tell you what she did. No one.
Okay, that's a problem, I think.
Yeah. So
Did you find out?
oh yeah, I tried. I tried really hard, and I took it upon myself to actually personally work with her, to try to develop her and to try to get her into a place that she could really be useful. And when I asked the office manager slash HR, and I asked the controller, who she kind of worked in between, what she did and what, did she report to them? No, but they felt so bad. And so that's why she was still there.
This just sounds like an episode of Seinfeld where Kramer can't get fired because he doesn't even work there.
Exactly.
It's a real problem.
It's like Office Space, red stapler. It's not that she was on that level at all, but
Yes.
the same thing, like nobody. And I had, so, and here's my dad, God bless. It's just, not a big deal. It's fine. It's fine.
Right.
He loves his people. And so we have a handful of those. Fewer now than we did before. But everyone kind of, I think the business was so successful and everyone made so much money. And so no one really worried too much about what anyone was doing as long as it got done.
Yep.
And so, of course, now fast forward 20 years and margins are shrinking, costs are rising, you can't afford not to pay attention. And so here I came in and I'm in a business group and they're asking me all these different aspects about the P&L and the balance sheet and these costs and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know. And then when I start bringing this stuff in, they're like, that's really high, or, you really need to look at this. And so all of a sudden I started asking questions. I started like lifting the lids on a lot of the stuff. And it's not that I ever want to lose the people aspect of it. It's not that I ever want to take that away, but I also want everyone to know why they're there and what they're doing and how they're contributing.
I think that it's really difficult when you're like, so I think one of the great things about family businesses is you keep people around for a really long time, longer than the average company. But so that's a blessing and a curse, because you can have people, like you said, who maybe are dead wood or you don't even know what they're doing. And, when things get tough, then some people have to get going. And this becomes really difficult, especially if it's an older employee who maybe doesn't have that many more, vital years left and is an old friend of the family, if you will, and we usually call them FO, whatever the first name of the owner is, friends of Richard, friends of Amber, whatever. And they're really hard to move into another seat or into another role. So
we have a couple of those right now, salesmen that the one guy goes fishing with my dad. I mean, it's like they've done it their whole lives. And so we're at this place, their department is not, it's not supporting their salaries. It just doesn't make sense. And he's also in his 70s. He should be hopefully ready to retire. It's just so hard for my dad to really face that. And it's hard for him to, on one side, he's like, yeah, we gotta let him go. But then I'm like, well, we have to really plan for that. What does that look like for him? We have to have that conversation with him. He's been here 20 plus years. Like, you're just gonna, we gotta do something. We gotta do the right thing.
Yep. Very, and not an easy thing to do. So listeners should understand and appreciate the difficult role that we're placed in as owners, as leaders, especially in a family business, and the dynamics that go along with that. So, okay. So what haven't we touched upon that would be really interesting for people?
I think not underestimating the challenges, right, of working with family. I think some of that is I was never anticipating. I kind of took that for granted when I came on board. I thought that somehow maybe it would be easier because it was my family. And lo and behold, when the good is when it's good, it's great. But when it's bad, it's probably like the roughest of the rough, the worst of the worst, because it's family.
And Amber, can we tie the good and the bad to the profitability of the company?
It
Like,
can be, absolutely.
but I mean, is
Absolutely.
it almost like you can chart the profitable months and then, you know, maybe not so profitable months or periods and say, wow, we were getting along really great during this, or is it not necessarily related, like correlated like that?
Um, I think when you're less profitable, it definitely brings up stress that creates a lot of challenges and tension. I think too, if you haven't worked on any sort of the interpersonal dynamics within the family, that working together tends to bring that stuff out. So, and so yes, I think you could tie that back to the profitability, because
Right.
when you're working together and if things are stressful, then it's going to put a strain on that relationship, and it's going to enunciate, I guess, some of the maybe the underlying issues, or the inabilities to maybe communicate or face each other. It definitely brought us all to another level of honesty, a need for clarity, a need for trust, and real understanding that I don't think I was really anticipating.
Okay, so you're a therapist and you come into this business so clearly, you know, talking about feelings, talking about, you know, things that are having honest, maybe, you know, radically candorous conversations are important. But maybe not everyone feels that way. Maybe not in your family, maybe not in a family business. And of course, I address some of this in my book where I talk about different conflict resolution tools and communication styles and you know, how to mediate this. But you know, I've had the pleasure of being a business coach and going into companies and being able to play basically business therapist, and garnering the trust. But so what was your process for getting through some of these difficult places, and what would you tell other people who maybe aren't so oriented towards having a business therapist or being a therapist? You know, like, you know, how do you get through this stuff? How did you get through it? And how do you recommend to other people that they would get through some of these thorny things that come up, family members?
Yeah, I think for me, checking, ego gets really triggered uh, when when we are when we get put into question, or when we feel challenged, or when we feel threatened. Our ego is the first thing to come to our defense, and that's never a good place to be when you're dealing with family, at least from what I found. So getting through my own stuff was really important, so that I wasn't putting my stuff on my family. So the healthier that I became and the clearer that I got, the more that I could see kind of like how our family dynamics were at play. And so I did a lot of work on myself. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of trainings. I just kind of did everything I could to get right with me, because I can't force anyone to go into therapy. I can't force my
Sure.
family to want to get better, but I can become the best version of myself that I can be. And I can be and get myself to be as level-headed and as clear with what I'm here to accomplish, that it's not a personal, when I'm at work, it's not a personal gain I'm going after, it's for the business. And so trying to remove as much, it's almost, I mean, that's impossible to remove your personal
But
aspect out of this, but getting more uh just getting clear and getting honest and getting humble, was really important, and coming and speaking truth, and holding that mirror up in a loving way. uh, that was the best way that I've kind of been able to traverse a lot of the challenges.
so, Amber, I think that's your truth and how you did it. So the difficult part is maybe not everyone wants to do that. So,
Totally.
you know, we always have a saying in my business. We say leaders are learners,
Mhm.
and So we give them a book because that's the easiest thing. Here, read this book, read the 5 dysfunctions of a team and understand, where are you guys on the trust level? Where are you on the, on this dysfunction, or, how cohesive are you? And so do you think that can work? I mean, and like, how did your father approach some of these difficult things? I mean, you come with a more, did he have the same kind of open therapy type of orientation to life and the world, or would he be like, hey, Dad, read this book and let's talk about this conflict resolution type of style, or, I mean.
Well, I think it starts with willingness, right? And I think it starts with knowing what you want to ask for, knowing what that person's ready for, and not asking them to show up in a way that is not possible. So I guess I setting reasonable expectations for yourself and others. And then, yes, trying to bring them along in a way, providing material or providing insight or people. I mean, I brought so many people into our space to help, open our eyes to different perspectives, to different ways of thinking of things, different ways of handling things. And whether or not any of that stuck, I think you always take little tidbits. Like I said, my business group has always been a huge resource for me of bringing new material, new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving, new ways of learning to the table. And my dad has been pretty open. He's been pretty willing. I think you hit an impasse when parties are not willing to communicate.
Got it. All right. So as we start to wrap up, biggest challenges in your industry at this time, biggest challenges in your business?
Biggest challenges in our industry as a wholesaler and distributor in the produce sector, we are in the last 10 years, we've been labeled kind of like the bad guy. We're the one that everyone should stay away from and go around and go direct and all that stuff. And while a lot of that sounds good in theory, we serve a really important purpose for both the grower and the customer. And so we're fighting this idea right now. We're fighting this image right now, which is really challenging. And we're also fighting a time where technology and all these other things are allowing for smaller operations to do things that they couldn't do 20 years ago, and get direct to the consumer. So we're having to look at, all right, how do we change our model? What do we do to help ourselves in this day and age where we have everything that we need on our phones or a watch or whatever? How do we pivot?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I don't know if you know John Tabis with Books. It's the flower bouquet direct.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
Phenomenal success story. Shark Tank, one of the early seasons, really has scaled up that business and disrupted it in a major way. And so, right, technology, if you're not with it, it works against you. So, so leveraging that. So, how technologically advanced would you give your company a grade? How are you guys doing on the technology front?
Oh gosh, I mean, if I gave us a scale of 1 to 10, I would put us at a 2.
Yeah, well, I would think that might be about average for a produce company. So
we're about at a 2. We in the last couple of years, like we've definitely added some good advances, and we have some transparency and some clarity around the operations in a way that is definitely helping us control costs and efficiencies and things like that. So, and we're looking to expand on that.
So are the Amazons and the Walmarts, the Costcos of the world, are they driving some of the innovation in this area, and are they crowding into your space?
I think not necessarily. I think there's so much amazing development in tech, in agriculture, and we're kind of like the last frontier, if you will, in a way, but also the first in some. And so there's incredible things happening, and Walmart is definitely at the forefront of that. Of course, Amazon on a whole different level. The biggest challenge with fresh is distribution. I mean, Amazon is still, everyone is having that issue. Like Amazon bought Whole Foods to solve for the distribution problem. So that to me is is still the issue that everyone is trying to solve for. How do you get from point A to point B with keeping the integrity and the quality and the food safety, all of that stuff? How do you do that and keep it affordable? Because you can do it, fast, cheap. What is it? Fast is three ways
Yes.
you can do it.
Yes, right. Understood. So Operation Warp Speed, which has to get vaccines distributed out to everyone in the world, I guess, but specifically in the United States. And those products have to be refrigerated at minus 80 degrees.
Right.
So maybe there's some learning lessons there. But but I don't think cheap is something that they're too concerned about, because they'll spend any amount, they can print the money. So interesting challenge. Interesting times ahead for you, and so glad to have you on this show. We could go on for hours. I think there's a ton of talking, and love to have you come back sometime. But in the interest of people's listening, let's keep it to under an hour. So Amber Flamminio, how do we reach you if people are interested in Umina produce? Would you like to be contacted, or shall they just go to your website? Sure. Yeah,
I mean, definitely you can go to the website. You can reach out to me at Amber, so it's AMBER at Umina, which is UMINA.com. We are hopefully looking to develop our B2C model pretty soon here, which will be linking the farmers and all of our shippers with the consumer directly, so not having to go to the store and whatnot. So those models are out there. We're looking at how we're going to refine our offering. So anyway, yes, please come check us out. And if you want to come down to the market and say hi, we are there almost 20 hours a day.
Wow.
I get there around 7. So if you want to come see me.
Great. Where's the market located? We're talking produce.
We're in downtown LA, so we're in the Terminal Wholesale Produce Market.
Gotcha.
So if you want to come by in bulk, we're there.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for being on the show. Once again, this is Jonathan Goldhill, your host, your business coach, and author of Disruptive Successor. And this is a show by, for, and about family businesses for your inspiration and education. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.